Welcome to the final walkthrough of frequently made mistakes for assignment 2B in my Scalable Microservices course in the spring of 2024. First, please make sure you document your code and using the format that's described on the website, or it won't be reviewed. There continue to be people who don't document their code, so I'm not reviewing it. Also, make sure you address all the comments that I've given in the preliminary versions of the frequently made mistakes. Also, your code will not be reviewed otherwise. People are doing better about this assignment, so I appreciate that. Also, make sure that you've enabled the enable preview in the VM options for the database service. I think most people have that working now, but if you're having problems, make sure that you do that. And if you need help, make sure you ask on Piazza and we'll help you out. So let's take a look at some issues here. So people are continuing to forget to put the something like this here. You can also update the search query constant to do the same thing. I kind of like this because it's a little easier to read, but just make sure you do that. Otherwise, your code will not run. Don't hard code path names. Use symbolic constants. That just makes things easier to ensure the client and server are synchronized properly. Also, make sure that you name this method the same name as the corresponding method name in the database sync proxy file. Otherwise, you're going to get problems because we're checking more strictly to make sure the names are consistent. Let's take a look now at the server beans file. If you take a look here, you need to make sure after you load the movie data set into a local variable, then you call this following printout. So you can make sure that we check the size. We need that in order to make sure you're doing things properly. Down here, please make sure to use the movie constructor reference rather than writing it out with a Lambda expression like this. And also, assuming that you've implemented the movie class properly, there's no need to pass any parameters to sorted at all. This should be handled in the comparison operators in the movie class, and we'll take a look at those here shortly. This is a general issue that people were running into. There's no need to do this because it's handled automatically by overloading and overriding the compare to equals methods that are part of movie. Some other issues down here, please don't call movie map. I'm actually going to remove that from the next version of the skeletons for assignment 2C to avoid confusion. And this implementation isn't fulfilling the specification. You need to make sure that you're reading the specification carefully and making the call here to ensure that the results are ordered as expected. There's no need to add this annotation to your list of doubles in the movie class. Down here, this is incorrect. We've talked about this in assignment 2A, so make sure you go back and watch the frequently made mistakes video. Similarly, this implementation is too complicated. Please go back once again, watch the frequently made mistake video for assignment 2A. Same thing here. This is also incorrect. It's going to blow up if you get a null value. I'll be adding some tests to test this in a more thorough way, so these things should get caught by the unit tests. This implementation is also incorrect because it's not handling null values properly, so please make sure you watch the frequently made mistakes video for assignment 2A to see how to do this. You don't need to lowercase the ID here. And those are most of the problems that remained left over from assignment 2A. So make sure you go back and watch those videos and update things and carry them over to assignment 2C. Down here, there's a bunch of issues here because the names are incorrect based on what these methods are supposed to do. Kind of got backwards for some reason. So make sure you look carefully at the specification and implement it properly using the Spring Data API keywords. Same issue down here. It doesn't match the specification. And then down here, this method shouldn't be in the database repository file at all. It's actually something that needs to be, it's already defined for you in the multi-query repository file, and it's got the right name there. So I don't know what this was doing here, but it shouldn't be here. Down here, make sure that you're thinking carefully about how you implement the methods in the multi-query repository impl class. In particular, don't violate the don't repeat yourself principle by duplicating logic in multiple places. This logic should be localized in the get query results method. And the implementation here is also incorrect. We'll talk about that later. Let's see, this part's okay, but we don't really need that. So let's just put a ... here. Now let's take a look at some issues with get query results. People had a lot of strange things in the code. This should be getting caught by the unit tests. And so you should be detecting these things and asking for help or trying to figure it out. ChatGPT can help you here a bit. There's no need to call create query here since that was done earlier before get query results was called. There's no need to call select here or criteria query from. Please use group by to eliminate duplicates, and you need to make sure you pass in the ID expression there so it can just focus in on that one column when it's doing this. We'll see this arises in several other places below. Down here, this is missing a parameter to group by. You need to pass in the ID expression. That way it'll just localize what it's doing. It's grouping by to the ID field, which is what actually contains the contents that we care about here, and the movie titles, for example. Down here, please replace all this stuff with toList or toArray or whatnot with reduce, together with using criteria builder conjunction and criteria builder and. And you should see some examples of this if you watch the lessons that I had out on things like the quote service. If you do that properly here, then you don't need to do this kind of a call. Moreover, calling or is completely wrong. You need to call and, but that should be handled up here with the use of reduce. Let's take a look down here. Some other issues with get query results that need to be addressed. Please make sure you pass the ID expression parameter to group by rather than what's shown here. Likewise, make sure you do that here as well. And also, don't use distinct. There's no need to use distinct. In fact, it's inefficient relative to using group by. So just use group by, passing in the appropriate ID expression parameter that's passed to get query results. There's no need to call select here. There's no need to call criteria query from. And this is missing a call to group by as per what I described above. Now let's turn our attention to the database service class implementation. Not quite sure what's going on here. Don't be calling stream here. This is unnecessary. We don't want to start out with a stream. You want to start out with a parallel stream. And let's just say use parallel stream instead. So do parallel stream here, not stream. And likewise, don't be calling sorted twice. Why call it here? It's going to be called down here after map multi, so you don't need to do this twice. And of course, you don't need to call parallel here either. This is unnecessary because we want to start out with a parallel stream. Some other issues, again, don't use stream, use parallel stream. Don't use flat map. I talked about that, and you want to make sure that you use map multi instead of flat map. That's discussed in the preliminary frequently made mistakes video. And also make sure that you update the code to use the latest version of the unit test, which will flag this as a problem. And this implementation is missing something important here because it's not fulfilling the spec. So take a look at the specification for this method to see what you should be doing here. Down here, again, don't be using flat map. Flat map does not work with parallel streams. We've talked about that a number of times. And don't be passing parameters to sorted. That should be handled by doing the movie class methods that implement comparable. So things like compare to, hash, and equals, will help with sorted, so you don't need to pass any parameters. And then here looking at search EX, the final glory of things not to do. This code is completely incorrect. All you need to do is just forward to this call on the repository field, and that will do everything. You don't need to call this. Well, you do need to call this, but you don't need to do all this other stuff. All this other stuff is unnecessary. This is all you need to do. So that's a walkthrough of the frequently made mistakes for assignment 2B. Make sure that you address these when you push your solution to assignment 2C, which will be out soon. I'll put that assignment out shortly. And that's going to have quite a bit of refactoring of the directory structures and the unit tests in order to make things much more refined and normalized, and the test should be more thorough as well. So you may also have to fix a few things from assignment 2B that maybe passed the test because we hadn't checked for them thoroughly. Also, you'll be upgrading to Java 21, so that will require some changes. But we'll talk about that when we release assignment 2C.